So hi everyone, good evening. Thanks for joining in. So yes, I just like to introduce our speaker for today. We have Miss Anjana with us. So Miss Anjana is a master's graduate in speech language pathology from All India Institute of Speech and Hearing in Mysore. She's also a consultant speech language therapist, and she also consults with different organizations. So she is an RCI licensed speech language therapist, and at the forefront, she's uses a lot of innovative approaches in her communication therapy. So as a founder, she runs this organization called Subodha, which is dedicated to serving individuals with diverse communication needs. She also offers a comprehensive speech therapy service, which is beyond the traditional speech therapy that we usually see. Her specialization also includes augmentative and alternative communications, which is both low tech and high tech solutions, which is specialized apps and other softwares as well. These tools are also instrumental in enhancing the quality of life for non speaking and minimally speaking individuals, also providing them with alternative means of expression and interaction. In addition to that, she also has developed professional AAC courses, which is tailored for speech therapists and special educators in collaboration with the Avaz app as well. Thank you so much, for Anjana, for taking your time off and coming today. Looking forward to hearing more from you. Over to you.
Thank you, Meghna. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me this evening. So the topic that I'm asked to talk about is enhancing communication skills. So during the course of this presentation, I'll be talking to you about various components of communication development and what are the communication challenges we see in children and how we can best intervene. So let's get started. So in the first part of the presentation, I'll be covering types of communication challenges and the importance of communication for development. So let me turn my video off. So hope the presentation is visible to everybody. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and I'll answer them at the end of the presentation. So I would suggest that if you are keen on making notes during the presentation, so I suggest that you make 3 columns: feeling, thinking, and doing. So there are various topics that are going to come up during the course of this presentation. So I would like you all to journal about how you feel about the topic that we're discussing. Do you feel overwhelmed, or is it something surprising, or is it something novel that you just heard? And what are you thinking about it, and what are the steps that you're going to take about it? So let's begin with a very beginner question. This question is for parents. So if you are professional, please refrain from answering. What do you think is the first speech milestone in a child's development? You can type your answer. Amrita says understanding. Vaseem says babbling, pointing. Eye contact, okay. So here's a clue. How does the baby announce that I'm here, I have arrived? The very first thing that you, yes, somebody said it, crying. Yes, the birth cry. So the birth cry is the first speech milestone. So it starts from there. So birth cry is an indication of that respiration has started, and the child is ready for the world. So from there onwards, the speech milestones, develop. There is cooing, babbling. You hear babies making different sounds. Then they make strings of sounds. Then jargon. So it sounds like words, but they're not yet words. And then they start having first words. They start speaking the first words, and then they put words together, form phrases and sentences, and so on. So it is around the age of 12 to between 12 and 18 months that we start noticing if the child has not yet developed spoken language. So around 1 year, between 1.5 years is when children start saying the first words. And so that is when the concern begins. And mostly the concern is that my child is not speaking. So we don't hear anybody say that my child is not communicating. So which means that communication and speech are almost given the same status. So that's the that most parents will initially have, right? That's the novel understanding that communication and speech are somewhat the same. But speech is actually the end result. It is the result of the processes, several processes that have already taken place. So now here the key word is speech. So let's trace back the steps. Let's look at the process of how this output comes to be. So before discussing that, I would like to show you this video. This is an MRI of what happens inside the mouth when a person is speaking. The video has no sound, but I would like you all to notice how complex and intricate the movements are. So you can notice the lip movements, the tongue movements, and even the tongue. Sometimes it's the tip of the tongue that's being used, the middle portion of the tongue. Sometimes it's the backside of the tongue, and then the tongue touching the hard palate, the tongue touching the soft palate, and the lips coming together, the nasal airflow happening. So a lot of things are happening, which is so intricate and complex. So here we can appreciate what an incredible thing speech is. And as we are speaking, we are not even making any effort. It comes to us so naturally and so easily. So now, the end result, right? So what happens before that? So here's a communicator. So the communicator has a certain, say, why would the communicator want to communicate? So the communicator has a thought. It could be a feeling, or it could be an internal sensation, such as hunger, thirst, or something that he or she wants, and that needs to be communicated. Right. So let's take an example. So let's say the communicator is looking at a picture. And so the thought in his or her mind is about vacation. So now the next step in the process is that the communicator needs to have some language. So the communicator needs to pull words from his bank of vocabulary and form a sentence. So let's say the communicator wants to say, let's plan a trip to Goa. So this is the message. So the message is ready here. The communicator is now, the next step in the process is motor planning. So as you saw in the video, now for each of these speech sounds, the speech muscles have to be programmed. So motor planning also is taking place at the same time. So how should the lips move, how should the tongue move, and how should everything come together? So that motor planning is made, and then comes the speech output. So if all these steps in the process take place properly, then what we hear is clear speech. So let's say the communicator called up his or her communication partner and says, let's plan a trip to Goa. Okay. So any step in this process, if there is a problem, either the thought formation is not happening properly, or there are sensory issues, or the person not yet has not yet developed basic language, doesn't have the words to formulate a message, or for most individuals, for most children, what we see is up until this point, up until the words, language, it happens properly, but the motor planning does not take place, and hence they're not able to speak and communicate. Right. So this is really important to understand, and this is the foundation. This is a foundational understanding to understand further concepts. So again, communication and speech is what we see externally. That is the output. So there are several pillars that that are very important for development of communication and speech. So as we know, pillars are the load bearing and stabilizing. They have this function of load bearing and stabilizing. So what are the pillars of communication and speech? Regulation, um, engagement, intentional communication, language and literacy, and motor planning. So when we say regulation, we're talking about sensory regulation, the sensory system able to regulate and participate, experience the world in a normal way. And the motor regulation, emotional regulation. So these are key components. This is a very foundational skill for communication to develop and happen properly. Engagement, the ability to engage with the environment, engage with people around. So for a child, the child should be able to engage with the people around.
Yes.
So the interest, social interest, that's a very key factor in communication development. So how do we learn language? We learn language by looking at other people who are talking, right? So the child hears the caregivers talking, and they learn from that. Intentional communication is when children begin to understand that if I do this, this is going to be the effect. So if I cry, my mother is going to come and attend to me. So very early on, they develop this intentional communication. It starts with behaviors, gestures, and then speech, so that the need to communicate and the motivation to communicate is also very important. Then language literacy, understanding of language, so understanding of basic language, and then more advanced language, and motor planning, as we already saw, for speech production. So if any of these components, if there are challenges in any of these components, there are communication breakdowns that are going to happen. So here are some examples of each of these components. So in this picture, you can see that the child is playing. This is solitary play. This is an example of solitary play. The child is wanting to play all by herself. I'm trying to join in. You can see I'm holding my hand as she is pouring sand from one thing to another. So I'm trying to develop joint attention here. I'm trying to develop engagement, awareness of herself, awareness of another person being there with her, and awareness of the environment, right? And this is an example. This is a form filled out by a young adult, an autistic adult. So he has made a list of what makes him feel nervous, what makes him feel anxious, what makes him feel angry, what makes him feel out of control. So this is part of our emotional regulation exercise. So first is awareness, right? So regulation, emotional regulation. If the child is not regulated, if the child is not able to focus, then we just cannot work further with the child. So here you, in this photo, you can see the child pointing to a toy, right? So he is, although he doesn't have all the words to ask for what he needs, he's using pointing, he's using the gesture of pointing as a way of communicating that he wants it. So this is called intentional communication. So as we go about, you'll see more examples. So here's an example of a child, Ripu. Ripu is an 8-year-old boy, autistic, receives speech therapy. He's been receiving speech therapy for the last 5 years. It's not yet developed spoken language. So the speech therapy approach for him is teaching how to say speech sounds and words. But there has been no progress with spoken language. So the child has been attending speech therapy for 5 years. There's no progress. That is the point to be noted. Now, just imagine this child goes to, say, is going to a school and is non-speaking. So what do you think will be the level of participation of this child and level of self-confidence? And what will the child be able to do? How much will the child be able to participate in the school and gain from what is happening in the school environment? You can type in the responses in the chat box. Minimal participation, yes. How do you think the child will feel about himself? Low engagement, poor self-esteem and confidence, yes. Child will lose confidence. Now, because this child doesn't have a reliable mode of communication, the child could be gesturing, the child could be using behaviors to communicate, but that's not sufficient, right? So because the child does not have a reliable mode of communication, there are, chances that this child, and especially if the speech therapy approach is only teaching speech sounds or trying to make the child say words, and the child is not able to say it because of the apraxia of speech, then there's a lot of wounding. Like, when you're asked to do something that you simply cannot do, there's no way that the child can do it, right? So a sense of failure, frustration, resentment, people start making assumptions, and this child, even though the child is growing up, people might treat this child as an eternal child. We use the term eternal child because if you look at children who are not able to communicate their preferences, express opinions, and do things that the peers are doing, that child is treated like a child forever. So that's the case of a non-speaking child. Now, the assumption is that children who are verbal, they do not require much support, which might not be true. So let's take the example of Tina, who's 16-year-old girl, autistic. She's verbal, but she still has communication breakdowns. Okay, so there is frustration. She's not cooperative, shuts down, and so the recommendation, because what we are noticing is behavior that's not manageable, so she might be recommended behavioral intervention. So which of these pillars, if we go back to the pillars, which of these pillars do you think this girl might be needing? Which area do you think this child might be needing more intervention? Intentional communication. Um, Intentional communication, she's able to communicate verbally and fluently. She's able to ask questions. She's able to. She has many questions, and she's so language wise, she's okay. Okay, I'll go back to that slide. So think about this child who is a teenager. So think about all the challenges that a teenager will have. And with a disability. So when we look at teenagers, what are they trying to understand? They're trying to understand themselves. They're trying to have a self-identity. And they want to be aware of what's going on with them, the changes that are going on, that are part of puberty, and how do they cope with it? Are they receiving any support, acceptance, people making assumptions? Then many of them are not informed about their own differences, right? So there is out of fear of isolation, so parents do not inform that this is how you are, this is how you're different from the others. So that might be causing a lot of self-identity crisis. So for this child, a lot of regulation support is required. So emotional regulation. Okay, so there are some more questions for both parents and professionals. So how often do you notice your child or your students' communication abilities improving after they are calm and regulated? So I see frequently, very often.
Anjana, should I open the poll from the...
Yes, please open the poll.
The poll has been opened now. I hope everybody can see in the poll. Yeah, you can vote here. Some questions, and if you have any queries, you can ask Anjana.
The first question is, how often do you notice your child's communication abilities improve after they are calm and regulated? Frequently, sometimes, or never? The second question is, which aspect of regulation do you feel has most impact on your child's regulation? Sensory regulation, emotional regulation, behavioral regulation, or all of the above? So sensory regulation would mean managing sensory overload. Emotional regulation, having strategies, having the child has learned how to handle frustration, anxieties. Behavioral regulation is managing impulsivity. All of the above, unsure. The third question is, which type of activity helps your child engage the most during communication attempts? Visual activities, sensory based activities, physical movement activities, interactive social activities, any other that's not mentioned here, or unsure. Okay. Yes, you can have more than one answer. You can choose more than one. So can we end the poll, Meghna? So I hope all of you have answered. So I'm going to end the poll. So majority of them have answered sometimes to the first question. Emotional regulation, I mean, regulation as such is um, is really important. Again, regulation could be sensory, emotional, behavioral, or all of the above. They're interconnected. Okay. Okay, so moving further. So this is an example of intentional communicative behavior. So if we are looking at very young children or any child who is still communicating using behaviors, how do we actually assess communication? So if what we are assessing is requesting attention, how does the child attract your attention? So these could be some of the behaviors that we might have to notice, pay attention to. So the child might be approaching the desired object using a body movement or using vocalizations or making noises, using facial expression, looking at the person, pressing a button to call for attention, pointing to the caregiver or beckoning you to come, or using a more symbolic way of communicating, using a picture, a photo. indicating written word or an object, calling your name. So an assessment of communication will involve all these minor details. So every behavior is communication. So uh, we make a very specific observation, intricate observation of all the behaviors that the child might be using to communicate. And from here, we take it, we try to um, translate these behaviors into words, into more symbolic way of communicating. So that is why communicative behavior is very important for a speech language pathologist. So we were looking at all the pillars of communication and speech. So literacy is also one of the most important pillars of communication. So usually the assumption is that literacy comes later. So let's focus on the other skills first, and then we'll think about literacy. So that need not be the case. You can do everything simultaneously. You need not wait for one thing to happen and then for the other thing to intervene. And also, if you look at some of the myths and assumptions, so some people think that let's focus on functional skills. You might have heard of this phrase, let's focus on functional skills. So literacy is that way the most functional skill. So if the child is literate, there are so many, it opens up so many doors, right? So literacy is also one of the core pillars of communication. So far, how is it? What do you feel? Is this information very overwhelming, or was it simple to understand? How do you feel about what we discussed so far? You can share it in the chat box if you wish to. And then what are your thoughts? What thoughts do you have at this moment about what you would like to do further for your own children, for your students, for your children? If you have anything to share, you can please put it in the chat box. Okay, nothing to share at this point. Okay, I'll move on. So what approach do we take? There's something in the chat box. Let me see.
If anybody wants to unmute and speak also, you can feel free to do that. So
Mridula, I'll take this question later. Please remind me. Thank you. Okay, so where do we go from here? So what approach, what mindset do we assume, right? So the best mindset to have is to presume competence. So we assume that the child is capable of communicating. Every child can communicate. Every child has the desire to communicate. It's an innate thing. It's a built-in thing. It's a very human thing. It's a very basic thing to have a desire and need to connect and communicate. So that's a given. And similarly, we also believe that every child can read, every child can learn. We just need to figure out how to do it in a way that is suitable for the child. So we take a neurodiversity affirming approach, which means that I hope you're all familiar with what neurodiversity is. Neurodiversity is having brains that are functioning differently, not particularly deviantly, right? So we don't um, we don't think of fixing the child, but we think of looking at the child's strengths, looking at how the child is functioning, how the child is experiencing the world in a very different way. For example, for an autistic child, the sensory experience is very different from that of a neurotypical child. Right? So we understand the child on on that basis, and we set our goals accordingly. So the goals are not to fix to a neuronormative standard. So say a typical child is supposed to be doing so and so, like say maintain eye contact or have reciprocal communication or participate in small talk. So these might not be neurodiversity affirming goals, right? So we are not looking at making this child look more and more normal, but we are looking at making this child thrive in a world that is very challenging for the child. So give them the accommodation, and by giving them the accommodations, by building the child up with the skills that are required, and making use of strengths of the child to develop a valued role for this child in the society. So now we'll move on to AAC, which is augmentative and alternative communication. So augmentative and alternative communication is relatively new, and it has developed quite a bit in our country, but we are still lacking in resources. By resources, I mean both manpower as well as technology. So Subodha is trying the vision of our organization is to make communication accessible for all individuals using the resources that are available. So currently we have high-tech apps available, but we still need a lot more resources, a lot more technology accommodations that can cater to a lot more individuals who have physical disabilities and who might need technology like eye tracking, switches, etc. So we look at some options that are available. So we have high-tech AAC, which means that we're going to be using a device, and the device itself might be a communication device, or within that device, like an iPad or tab, you download the communication app from the Play Store, from the App Store, and start using it, like we use other apps. Or it could be typing. Typing is also a form of AAC. All of us use. Gestures, signs still hold good. They have their own place. And the letter boards or the alphabet boards, just the 26 alphabets is what all you need when the child becomes literate, right? The child can spell and communicate or type and communicate. And before the child acquires that level of literacy, we go with symbolic communication. As you can see on the right hand side of this page, the books, the communication symbols are what the child will learn for a particular word. Right? So, for example, I, for the word I, there is a human pointing finger towards themselves. So the child is going to learn and connect these symbols within the context that you're introducing the symbols. And that is called modeling. That is called aided language input. So does my child or student need AAC? Will my student or child benefit from AAC? That's the question that we get always. So typically children start saying words by the time they are around 12 and 18 months of age. They start putting two words together and make sentences and so on. So if you find any of these things to be, if you're saying yes to any of these things, then you can go for AAC. If your child is about 2 years and isn't talking yet or isn't talking much, the child is talking, but you can't understand the child's speech. The child is scripting or only labeling things. So the child might have echolalia. And there again, the communication breakdown is happening because the receiver is not understanding the child's message. So it's not only that the criteria is not only non-speaking, that non-speaking child should be is the only child that requires EAC. Even verbal children who are speaking fluently and are verbal, sometimes have their shutdowns and they're not able to. They have their meltdowns, sensory overload, sensory overwhelm, and they have a shutdown, meltdown. And the first thing that they lose is speech. The first thing that they're not able to do is communicate. So that is when they also need communication supports. So AAC is for everybody, and AAC is for both verbal and non-speaking children. So how we also take into account how is the child's participation in the classroom activities, and how is the child's ability to how is the child able to demonstrate what he has learned to the teachers. In case of a non-speaking child, how does if you ask a question, how does the child say how he has understood? So suppose you say, what is photosynthesis? So how does the child tell you? Maybe the child knows what is photosynthesis, but how does the child tell you, explain to you when there is no speech to communicate? So the child needs communication, alternative communication options, even for verbal children. When they have very minimal speech, or when the speech is unintelligible, not understandable, they will need communication supports. So taking all these things, factors into account, we decide whether the child needs AAC or not. So that would actually be most of the children. So especially for individuals on the autism spectrum, if the child has apraxia of speech, speaking, like I said, and if the receptive expressive language gap is very large, which is the case in most autistic children, the child knows, understands a lot, but not able to express as much as he or she understands. So that is when we really know that this child needs AAC. So let's take an example. Jabin is a teenager diagnosed with autism and is non-speaking. She has been trained on using PECs, but communication is limited to requesting for food and a few activities she likes. Jabin's strength is that she has developed a repertoire of gestures and signs that her family members can understand, the people at home can understand. However, there are times when Jabin expresses anguish and frustration. The family members also haven't been able to interpret it. They're looking for ways to expand Jabin's communication. So how often do we hear this story? Right? So this is the story of many children who are, in the age range of, like say, 8 and above, and in the teenage years. So what happens is parents, caregivers at home understand the child. They know the child the best. So they know everything about the child, every gesture, everything. So sometimes the parent might have a blind spot. Like, they're not able to think beyond whether, should we try communication alternatives? Is this level of communication sufficient? Things like that. And also from a professional point of view, there have to be professionals who are willing to guide and support in this journey. So it's a two-way street. So what we see is that as they grow up, their thoughts are more complex, the needs are much more, and they are going through these ups and downs, emotional regulation and changes. So they need more language to be able to express. If they do not have language, and if they do not have a reliable mode of communication, that's when the behaviors come up, show up, frustration, and throwing tantrums and things like that. So why are we actually so scared of AAC? So what is the mindset barrier that we have? So if you look at AAC, any AAC system, so what it has is, if you look at an app, for example, the app has vocabulary. So what does the vocabulary entail? Nouns, verbs, articles, adverbs, pronouns, prepositions, all the parts of speech, right? So if we are not, so the speaking individuals, let's take ourselves for example. So let's say we have it all in our brain, right? And we're pulling information, whatever we need adjectives, we have it, we need prepositions, we have it. So we're pulling it from, where the bank, the word bank that we have, and then using it for communication. So what about a child who has it, but then who is not able to speak and communicate, right? So the what we have inside our brain needs to come out visually, and needs to be represented. Like just like you have a menu when you go to a restaurant. So what is available? Okay, so whatever is available in the language, in that particular language, the words, the phrases, that needs to be visually available to the child so that the child can choose and communicate. So it's as simple as that. So what is the problem in using AAC? So the myth, a very big myth is that if we use AAC, the speech will not develop, or it might be delayed. It might become a barrier. That's the fear of many parents, and unfortunately, some professionals also feel the same way and advocate not to use AAC. So we'll have to be, be aware of that, and you know better, you understand better. So we have the core words and the fringe words, and the knowledge of alphabets and how to combine them. So all this is part of the AAC intervention. So we work on teaching the child core words, we teaching the child fringe words, combining the two, and also we take literacy very seriously. So there are, to give you a very broad overview of AAC, there are picture-based apps and text-based apps. So Avas, for example, is a picture-based app primarily. It also has a keyboard option. So we have many more apps that are similar, and most apps have more or less the same things, but organized, the vocabulary is organized in a different way in each app. So there are text-based apps also, where there are no pictures, no symbols, but only it's a keyboard and a lot of options, word prediction options and things like that are there. So when we choose a communication app, we choose what is called a robust communication app. So a robust communication app is something that has all these features, the core words, fringe words, option of typing, option to have some pre-stored messages, and grammatical features. So it has to have the past tense, present tense, and things like that. Superlative, comparative, all the grammatical features as well. Now let's look at some examples of how people have used AAC in their homes. And then we'll look at how AAC has been used in schools and other settings. So this is an example of use of low-tech AAC. So this is what we call, taking printouts and putting up on the walls, or putting up in, making it available in spaces where there are communication opportunities. So don't you think the dining table, the dining area is a space for communication, right? Is a space for connecting and interacting. That's when the family comes together and you have conversations, you You talk about food, you ask for food, you ask for more food, you comment about food, you talk about other things. So that's the space where so this parent has pasted some communication charts, printouts on the table, so the child can point and indicate. And similarly in the bathroom and one next to the door. So this is called environmental engineering, where you make the environment around the child accessible, more communication accessible. So here the child is having a tab and a communication app, and also a low-tech version of it. Meaning low-tech, by low-tech I mean a paper-based version of it as well, which you can carry anywhere and everywhere. Let's look at this video.
You want carry a smart. Papu is not good today. No Papu today. Okay. Rasam with pickle? Okay. You want carry a smart.
So here the child feels that I'm being asked. I have some control over my environment. So just imagine not being asked, just assumed and just given something because the child is not able to communicate. So this is how we develop, we develop awareness, self-awareness. This is how we develop all the skills that are required to, have a good self-esteem. So this is the beginning. So other simple examples that that can be shared is we routines are very important, right? At home, when we're home, we are busy with household chores. So that's actually quite a good communication opportunity where, so for example, you say you are taking out the washed dishes and putting them at various spaces in the kitchen. So that's an opportunity where you can use prepositions, location words, take out, put it here, put it there. Oh, this goes in here, not there, pull, above, put it above this or below this. So you just are probably doing this, but you have to do it in a more, you have to emphasize on it. You have to think about what vocabulary you're going to use, what function of language, what parts of speech you're going to work on, what is the language input you're going to provide for your child at home. And routines are great opportunities to do that. So you can have a communication board stuck on the fridge, and you can point out, you can have conversation interactions around that as well. So fridge is also a great space for interaction. So when we buy groceries, so you can look at, you can expose the child print on the groceries. You can, so we usually take out the old stuff and we put the new stuff. We take out the old stuff forward, so that's used up, and then the fresh stuff that we have brought, we put it back, right? So you can teach front and back, and so what you're going to use first and then next. So a lot of opportunities, just have to think, and this is where a speech language pathologist can help you plan. Cooking, and they love food, so that's also an opportunity to introduce vocabulary. Here you're not only introducing vocabulary, you're also working on various communication functions, right? So what are the reasons we communicate? Why do we communicate? We communicate to be able to describe something, to be able to instruct something to somebody, to be able to direct, to be able to narrate, So all these functions of communication you're going to target. So you're going to become more aware of all these components of communication and plan accordingly. Right? Sorry. So this is if your child is interested in interactive games and interactive play, there are several apps available, so you can make use of that and introduce what I was talking about, communication functions and vocabulary. So here the child, the girl is going up, coming down. So you can use those words. So I'm going to forward it a little bit. So let's take the plate out. Let's put it on the table. So what you need is actually a resource um, for starting that interaction, for having that communication, and you need to have a plan, and you need to have access to communication. Like you have to have if you're using a communication app, you have to have it by your side when you're interacting with your child at all times. So here is the mantra for for parents and professionals alike. So model language without expectation. We don't teach and then the next moment we're not testing the child. So we model a lot and then slowly step back and make way for the child to initiate communication. And then having an accountability relationship with a professional. In this case, communication. So having an accountability relationship with your speech language therapist will be very helpful. And not giving up, because this work is really difficult. It takes a lot of repetitions, a lot of work to be able to move from one stage to another, and teamwork. So at home as well as amongst the professionals, there has to be collaboration and teamwork. So the child's communication partners, the closest are the parents, and then comes the caregivers. Say you have domestic help, so sometimes they are taking care of the child, so they need to be aware of these things, and they also need to know what strategies, how to talk to the child, what tools to use, and so on. So teamwork there matters. Every communication partner needs to participate. Routines are wonderful opportunities, as we have already seen. And although we are targeting, say, a particular skill, say typing or pointing to words on the app, using the communication app, whatever, we are still accepting gestures, we're still accepting behavioral communication. We're still going to acknowledge multimodal communication. So as an autistic individual says, I love multimodal communication. My brain loves it. It is so much easier to communicate with multimodal communication. It is hard to try to force myself to one communication method when I can use multiple. Life is easier with multiple. Different methods have different advantages. So this is true for us. So it's true for everybody. If you have not yet come across this book called Talking Fingers, this is a very good book to understand how the non-speaking autistic communication. So this is something that I recommend. So SLPs can be a coach, a cheerleader, and an accountability partner. So this is how you can make use of your professional, your therapist. So they not only work with your child, but they should also be able to coach you. So if you're a parent, you have to also be coached, because you're the person spending most of the time with your child, right? So so some 2 sessions per week versus the amount of time that you spend with the child, right? So that's a great um, a whole lot different. So you need to be coached. You need to ask your SLP to be coached, and the nice thing is that parents share every small win that they have with the. So I get messages about how they just did this and did that and every small step. So it is so nice to cheer them and to share this success with each other. And so accountability, yeah, so both ways. For the parent needs to do the work and then get back to the professional, and the professional can also guide what next to do. So that way it becomes, the process becomes much more easier. Otherwise it can be very overwhelming for the parent. So what else? We focus on not only language, but at the same time, if we are looking at AAC, we also need to build operational competencies for the child. The child should be able to carry the device or the AAC system. The eventually, gradually, the child should be able to see if the charge is less, they need to put it on charge. If the volume is less, they need to know how to turn up the volume. So we need to build those operational skills as well. And then strategic communication skills is, like we say, multimodal communication is important. So the child should be able to also think about what mode of communication is going to be the best for me to in this situation. So if I'm going to be playing with my peer in the park, so do I take my device with me, or do I just take a binder, um, or do I just take some communication chart with me, a book with me? So those things also need to be explicitly taught to the child, explored for the child and with the child. So social skills and emotional skills, of course, part of regulation. So these are some resources, recommendations for weaving literacy and language using AAC. So you can, so there is one very good app that I always recommend to all parents, Fun Duda Books app, which has animated stories. Tar Heel Reader is where you have these small books that focuses on core words. So there is storyweaver.org, which has Pratham books, which are digital versions of the physical books. You can make use of your pictures, photos to have conversations. You can take pictures from magazines, recipe, comic books, listening to songs, audiobooks. So this is the best part of communication. So communication is like salt. No matter what fancy thing is going on, it's whatever it is, salt is still a very basic ingredient that has to be present in everything, right? So similarly, communication is should be part of every activity that your child is doing. So here are some, so we looked at what is possible at home, in the home environment. Now we're looking at what's possible in the child's school environment. So this is a place called Lingophile Skills Hub. So these pictures are taken from the social media handle. So I had worked with them over the last year, and so this is one communication board that we have. We had in the hallway, and then in the entrance. So this is very simple to do. Anybody can do this and make the environment more communication accessible. So here on the left-hand side, a math class is going on, and the child is indicating the answers on using the keyboard on the communication app. So on the right-hand side, you see the child using the letter board, spelling the keywords of the lesson. So as you can see, this chart is the zones of emotional regulation. There is green zone, blue zone, yellow zone, and red zone. So we had created similar spaces within the hub where there is a green zone. When the child is happy or does something good, they get to be in that zone and do something fun over there. And the blue zone is where they where fidgets are kept, and a weighted blanket is kept. If they are sick, if they're not feeling well, they can lie down and use that space for some time. And if they are anxious, worried, the yellow zone, they can talk to an adult, so they can call for an adult. And the red zone was an isolated zone where if they are out of control, having a meltdown, so they can they can go to that zone, calm themselves down, and get back. So you can do this at home as well. You can try this at home. You can create different spaces around the house where they get to do these things, experience these things in case they are experiencing these emotions, which obviously they will. So on the left hand side, you see again a large communication board, which was part of the annual day function. So these are some possibilities at the workspace in the school for the child. So here's a teacher using projecting Avaz on the board. So this is another school I was consultant at, and so we made placemats. During the snack time, the kids used to take out their placemats, and so the placemat has words like I like, don't like, more, finished, stop. So kids would, this is to just facilitate communication around snack times. It's really important to recommend that the child takes their AAC system with them when they go to their schools or wherever. So you have to look at what type of AAC system suits best. If the high-tech device is difficult, then at least the low-tech AAC system must be with the child. And at Subodha, we are trying to enable this by having conversations with the teachers, with the staff at wherever the child goes to, trying to get people to engage and understand why this is important and why they should allow this, and why they and how they can use it. So parents and professionals will have to take that extra step to make sure this is being used by everybody around the child. So this is something that has become popular over social media. So this dad has tattooed the 26 alphabets on his arm, and the child has.
What butterfly? U, T, E, R, F, L.
He's learning to spell and communicate. He has an AAC device as well. So this is an example of how creative you can get. You can have those things on. You can have those things on symbols on pillow covers, curtains. So people have had it on the T-shirts. So very many creative ways of using AAC to make it more and more accessible as possible for the child. So want to end this presentation by with this video. So this young man is a student of mine. So he is actually sharing an experience. So let's hear. So he's using a letterboard, He also uses a communication app. So we always use a combination. He uses pictures as well. So he's a multimodal communicator. He cannot speak and communicate.
Time. You have to give me time. That's what we're saying.
Are you able to hear the voice?
Okay. I can express my thoughts. Will have to give me time. Yes. Time. Correct. And T. Time and O. P. P. O. R. G. U. I. T. Time and opportunity. You are saying? Okay. People have to give me time and opportunity. Okay.
So he's saying that people need to give him more time and opportunity. So he's saying at his center, the teachers will ask a question but will not expect him to answer the question. So he just passed, and so whereas others get to answer, so maybe sometimes it happens because the teachers are not aware. Sometimes even when the teachers are aware, I have shadowed for kids, non-speaking kids in the classroom. What happens is if the group is a mixed group, there are speaking kids. The speaking kids take a lot of the teacher's attention, so the teacher's attention naturally goes towards the kids who are verbal, and so the teacher misses out on the non-speaking kid. So it's really very important, ideally, having a shadow, making it a priority for non-speaking kids. I think should be a priority, having a shadow teacher for non-speaking kids. So that's how we ensure that they participate in the class. So also for this student, the mother was sharing that. So as you noticed in the video, he has this habit of correcting his T-shirt several times. So that delays his communication, but can't. So he has OCDs as well. So you really can't help it. So the shopkeepers nearby, so when he goes to the shop, he has a tendency to arrange things in the shop and then rearrange. So anyway, the mother takes the AAC with her, takes the letterboard with her, takes the cough drop with her when she goes to the shop, and the shopkeepers actually welcome it. So they have she's been successful in creating awareness there, and so that's one place. And he also uses it to wish and communicate with his extended family members. So that's something that everybody enjoys in their family. So this is what we mean by having a valued role for the individual. So when we have a child who is diagnosed with a certain condition, the child is subjected to a lot of therapies, right? So, which is inevitable. But then we have to look at some point. We have to look at a role for this child as the child is growing up. So, like this person, for this young adult, his role is that he is a cousin, he has cousins, he is a grandson, he loves to interact with his grandparents. So that's the role. So he has a role at home, and because he has been now given a reliable mode of communication, he is able to execute those roles. He is able to live those roles, right? And similarly, for every child, the child has a role of being a son or a daughter, a sibling, and so access to communication will help them live that role. And then we also need to think beyond I mean, then comes the vocational aspect, the social aspect, the role, larger role in the society, and so on. So you can also make them have a different role other than receiving therapy. If the child is, so, for example, this adult is good at cooking. So if I ask him to teach me a recipe, I am inviting him in a different role. So we are setting up a different role for him, not just a recipient of my classes and therapy and so on. So if a child is good at something, if a child is talented or good at something, so you can always think about how you would have behaved with a typical child, and then think about what is this child missing out on. So get them to share what they're good at, or you learn from them, and make them feel like they have a role beyond being a student, beyond being a child subjected to therapy, right? So that is it. And if you would like to contact me, you can find more information by going on the website. These are the details. You can find me on social media, Instagram and Facebook. You can look me up on LinkedIn as well. So thank you. Now we're open for questions and discussion.
Anyone who wants to unmute and ask any questions, yeah, please go ahead and feel free.
I'm often I introduce my kid to different flashcards and all. So sometimes it is like more of what we say pictographic memory, or it's a kind of a pattern memory, or how to discriminate whether he is actually getting the uh, phrases or trying to link that to it. I'm trying to ask like how to go a step forward for verbal reasoning. Like uh, he should be able to understand the picture's meanings rather than trying to associating a word with that picture. So how to transition to that phase?
Okay. So my follow-up question to you is, how are you introducing the flashcard to your child? Are you showing him the flashcard and then saying what it is and then putting it down? And then
No, actually, what I'm trying to do is, I as a starting point, I wanted to start with verbs and nouns. Okay, so there is this series called Brain Bug series, which is popular on most of the Amazon and all. So it has pretty big pictures and clear explanation of that word and action. So when I try to most of the things I have just shown him just twice or thrice. I started with all everyday objects as nouns, and then so everyday objects I have shown him, and then he was able to recognize. Then I went for actions, verbs. So almost 50 plus words are there where uh, I have introduced maybe some 10 or 15 of them. Like he knows that when I hold his hand and say run, run, run. So if there is a picture which is running, I have told him like twice or thrice. He was able to recognize it, so he remembered it. But
okay,
I have this doubt, like whether he's trying to just by heart that picture with the word, or is he really able to understand? He did not communicate back to me, but he was able
I
to.
understood. Yeah, I understood your point. So my suggestion is to introduce vocabulary within a context, within a meaningful context, so you don't have this doubt whether the child does he remember, does he understand or not. So how I would introduce verbs, for example, is I use GIFs, not flashcards, because flashcards are static pictures. The child might understand running because the legs are, the picture looks that way. If you use a GIF, the child can actually see the action and remember associate the word with the movement or with the visual image. Even better is always to introduce vocabulary within a meaningful context. So we introduce vocabulary, like say through reading or pictures, conversations. So you just weave a conversation around it. So you can take pictures of people running and introduce the word running, and you can just weave a little bit of conversation around it. So these people are running because they want to go to the finish line, and so see, look, this person ran really fast and came first, and so things like that. So you weave a conversation around the vocabulary that you're introducing, or you introduce vocabulary within a routine, like the examples that we saw, so that the child will associate the word with the context and remember to use it. So now if we are using flashcards, the child might just know the words, but the child does not know where to apply it, right? So to make it errorless teaching, so we introduce vocabulary within a communicative context. So we introduce adjectives like spicy, sweet around mealtime, so the child can immediately experience and understand and retain it and use it within the same context as well.
Like, how do you one last question, no? How do you deal with children actually if suppose they're always on the move, let us say, because trying to make him sit or focusing on something, if really becomes very much stress, so he's always on the move, like move. So if I try to start to catch my the tab and model and keep on saying something running behind him, it sometimes he feels like no, he again has come to teach something to me, or he again has came to ask something or try to put some things before me. So better I will run away from him. So such kind of I don't know. Maybe I am the reason for that behavior, or what is actually causing, or how should I deal with the children, like a child who is always on the move, because
So there are two
that
things
vestibular needs are so high.
right. So there are two things happening here. One is the child knows that you're teaching, and the child is trying to avoid. So there you can look at um, tweaking your interaction style with the child a little bit. So you might have to discuss with your therapist as to what kind of strategies you can use there. And another suggestion is to use a boundary, a physical boundary. So say the child needs movement. So your child needs movement to learn. So we're not going to take away that. We're not going to force the child to sit and do a tabletop activity. So there are children who need movement. So, but what we do is we create a boundary. So not beyond this room or not beyond this. So you can move and come back, move and come back here. So you can work with a child who is on the move as well. Maybe you need to look at, take some professional help there and watch, observe how it can be done, what works with your child, what strategies, or you can also use therapeutic ball, making the child sit on the therapy ball rather than make him sit on a chair or something. So have more movement-based activities to teach language, to communicate with your child. So that's a very brief answer. So for more, specific intervention, you'll have to get in touch with a professional.
Got it, man. Got it. Thank you.
So there was Bridila's question during the presentation. When it comes to literacy, while helping the child to read words, which approach is better? Phonetics or sight words? So both largely largely phonetics, phonemic awareness. So we start by building phonemic awareness, and then we introduce word families, words that have, like say, words that end with at, in, an. So we have 36 such word families in English language. So we take that approach, and of course some sight words as well. So most children, you might notice that they have already acquired reading somehow, even when they were not taught. So does that answer your question, Rudula? Okay. Are there any new? Are there any parents who are new to AAC and who are looking at whether we should go for AAC or not?
Excuse me, may I ask a question, Anjana ma'am? Kabir Bhogilalia.
Yes.
I just wanted to know, in your view, how does technology in today's world of education fit in for children with these problems? How does it fit in today?
So technology is ever expansive. So it's really exciting to see a lot of accessibility features coming up for children who need these things. So for an autistic child, so AAC is something that we are looking at, but it's not only AAC, not only an app that we're looking at. We also need to make the learning environments, much more technologically, technology friendly. So we need to have smart classrooms. So whatever you see happening for typical children needs to happen for children with these conditions as well. So we would like to see more smart classrooms, smarter learning methods, approaches being used, which will encourage peer and also make it much more interesting and lively for children. So this is happening in other parts of the world. So we would really like, similar things happening in our country as well.
Ma'am, just a follow-on question would be: are these things affordable for families and people who need them, or it's a very intensive investment?
So yeah, that's a good question. An AAC app, a high-tech app, will require an investment of having a tab in the first place. So you can guess how many people can actually afford it. So I mean, in urban places, we see that parents are able to afford, and they can have access to these children can have access to these things. But in semi urban or rural, it's still we haven't reached there yet, unless it's part of a CSR or charity activity. Yeah, so that's how it is at present.
Well, I hope in this day and age, as Digital India changes, I hope that it addresses all neurodiverse children and people. Thank you very much for your talk, madam.
Thank you. Any other questions? And I see some parents I'm familiar with. Would you please like to share how AAC has impacted your child? So if we have parents or professionals who are new to this, that will be very helpful. If you can please unmute and share a little bit about. May I request Bindu? Would you like to share anything? Bindu Sripadarajan?
I think she got disconnected in the meeting.
Oh.
Ma'am, I wish to share actually, I started to use AAC just almost like maybe 6 months, but
Yes.
I don't wanted to really pressurize my kid in trying to interact with it. Or one thing I have observed is like AAC is a high-tech device is a little bit overwhelming to him because pictures are nearby or the pictures are in different fashion. That is the reason why I went to flashcards and started to teach him things. Uh, I have tried to paste a different the stickers of Awaz printout on in the washroom and the net the doors and at the near fridges, that whatever examples you have shown, that really helped me. So there is actually a buy picture on my door. So whenever my kid wants to go out, he will show that picture that we have to go out by. So, and whenever I ask him like, where shall we go daily for cycling? So he will point to the cycle and show that. Instead, there is actually a bike next to the cycle. He wants to do bike first and then go to cycling. So he will show bike. So when I ask for cycling, then he will tap that. So that low tech was actually really little bit working, but somewhere I feel like I have to include more words to him. So I'm stuck here only a little bit. This is a small achievement, and like some recently I have tried to uh, show the AC and family members, and I have put my phone on a loudspeaker, and I asked him like who is on the loudspeaker, who is on the speaker, who is trying to speak to you. So he has listened for at least some couple of seconds, like 6 7 seconds, and then he tapped the picture of person who is trying to speak to. So that was a little bit. He is just 4 years old, so he is trying to catch slowly. So that he tried to show me certain path of communication expressively, mainly not a receptive language, mainly expressive language of small whatever expressions he can do.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing, Mr. Sham. I remember we discussing that during a coaching, parent coaching session.
Yeah. I last time I attended your parent coaching, so I have taken like I have started from there only. So that is the point where when I started ASC. So still I'm stuck at this point only, like to taking it much little forward, like making him to choose it by himself. But it becomes
that
very difficult.
yes. So no, you are doing great. You so the independent spontaneous communication comes much later. So keep going, keep modeling in various communicative contexts. I think try more movement based activities and providing language input during those activities, as your son is more he likes movement.
One last question I have, man. Like actually, when people start to say like teach expressive languages, like conventional things happen. Like we go to school when people teach alphabets first, and then go to words, and then go to. This is the conventional teaching I went through in a school in my childhood. So, but when it comes to teaching things to children, like what is the sequence we should follow? Like I have just tried to show him as many verbs as possible, as many action words as possible, as many nouns as possible in terms of flashcards. Still it is just a small thing, but when people go for there are like when, how, what, so many options, like how to move next to, like is it through as like you said situational based words introduction, or can we do activity based flashcards teaching? Maybe I may be wrong in teaching like that, but there is also a conventional approach where people try to teach us in school. uh, this is like this is
So we
the
had a
flow
yeah,
of
go ahead.
vocabulary.
So we had a curriculum, and the teachers used that curriculum to teach us. So here our curriculum would be, we can look at the typical developmental milestones as a guide for you to see what next you can teach. But you also need to know the current baseline, the current functioning level of your child. Like what is the current language level, what is his level of understanding and expressing. So in terms of content also, how much of grammar he knows, what are the kinds of vocabulary he's been introduced to, how much he's able to understand and how much he's able to use. So if you know the baseline, if you know the level, you can keep taking the next step. But a blanket strategy suggestion for you is to introduce whatever you're introducing in a context, in a communication context. It could be reading, it could be playing, it could be routine based interaction, or you could be watching a video and teaching. So whatever the child is interested in and whatever suits his learning, but introduce it within a communicative context. I think that's the technique that you can learn, you can pick up. And if you pick up that, I think it'll be easier for you to keep moving forward.
But one common thing that
We didn't
actually
learn that
happens.
way. We didn't learn that way in school. They don't bring up a context and then do all that. So it used to be a lesson, question, answer, and things like that. But we were able to learn outside the classroom as well. But here, for children, for our children, we need to do explicit teaching. Like we really need to teach everything, plan teachable moments around the child's routine.
Understood, ma'am. But one more thing, ma'am, like most of the Indian environments, either outside or inside, it will be mostly multilingual. So, how do you actually deal with
Multilingual is fine. Multilingual is fine. There's no harm in using, no harm in child being exposed to multiple languages, as research has established. But we still continue to use one. You choose one language where which you are dominantly providing your language input in. So it's okay to be bilingual. So we are sometimes talking in our native language and then using English, and the child is exposed to English in the school environment. It is fine. Children do fine with it. But keywords is something that you need to make sure which language you're going to be using. Any more questions?
Okay, I think we can wrap up. Oh, Josephita, you have something you want to ask? Yeah. Okay. No, you just put in a comment. Okay.
Okay, so Josephita says, I have a shadow client who is diagnosed with ADHD, age 7. He's a speaking child and loves to engage in conversations. He faces auditory sensory overload in his classroom environment quite often, and this means that my voice also gets lost in the auditory stimuli he's exposed to. As of now, his parents are not on board with the idea of noise cancellation headphones or earmuffs. So I've really found that using visuals help him attend and communicate better in this environment. Yeah. Okay. So okay, thanks for sharing, Josephita. Do you have any question related to that?
I just wanted to share this because you were talking about, how it's been. I just wanted to share it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anjana. Thanks for coming in and sharing your insights with us. If anybody wants to get in touch with Anjana, we'll also share her contact details in the mail if you've registered. Otherwise, Anjana, if you can just put it in the chat box in case somebody is not noted down, they can note it down. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, ma'am.